Hey, why don't we, me and you, do another meanwhile on Snapchat, and this one, again, is about consciousness. Because you haven't had enough about consciousness. And when I'm talking about consciousness, I mean global consciousness. What is global consciousness? Now, first of all, let's try and identify the thing before we get into the details. So let's do that. Okay, I think it's probably time we dust off the consciousness talk and stop playing around with silly videos about movies that are probably going to make me look tiny and very important to the existence of humans, but talk about the other destiny that I have, consciousness. So when it comes to consciousness, we need to think of things from two perspectives, either your own perspective or the outside perspective. Okay, so if we're telling the story of life, let's talk about somebody in your past. They have a birth, they have a life, they have a death, whatever. Let's talk about somebody in your future. Okay, so they will have a birth, a life, a death, etc. We can talk about that because the story of life can be seen from any angle. However, consciousness throws a big old spanner in the works because your perspective is locked to time. So you may have had a birth, you may be doing a living, but you haven't had a death yet. So your perspective of time is different to the rest of the story of life. And that is, obviously we can say for each individual person, because each individual person that has a consciousness, I'm sure we all do, but each person that has a consciousness can then lock out of the normal story of life and go into this version where they see things from their perspective and they can effectively stop time and control the story of life. But let's not get into that. This is pretty good. It's my third one of the day. Okay, thank heavens, now we understand the two perspectives and how global consciousness allows us to see the world from a different perspective because we've stopped time. We understand that. Let's get into the important stuff. No, hold on. Before we do that, let's take a quick break to think about aliens because that always comes in handy, I think. Every time I start one of these videos, I think to myself, I need to slow it down and just get to the basics. What is consciousness and how does it manifest and how do you best live your life? That's what I think I should do, and then I think, no, I want to talk about how we're going to make contact with aliens. So your single consciousness in your head basically means nothing. It's irrelevant. Whatever you think is isolated and it does nothing. However, when your single consciousness is going to be connected to another consciousness, you make a global consciousness. We're going to have one of these on Earth very soon, in about a year or two. Now, aliens across the universe, what? They too physically far for us to make contact with. However, when consciousness is connected, the physical distance between them is not what's being measured. It's like entanglement and quantum tunneling. It doesn't matter the distance in time, they can be entangled. The consciousness is entangled into one global consciousness. The aliens, they're going to have their own global consciousness entangled themselves, far away physically. However, their one and our one will be able to connect. And that's how we're going to make contact with aliens, probably in about 3 or 4 years. Am I getting a global Nobel Peace Prize? Or is this going to cause conflict? Are they going to want to fight with us? Either way, don't blame me. I'm just a scientist at heart. Okay, that was more important than I thought it would be. I'm glad that we did that. But let's get back to the actual important things. Global consciousness. Okay, so the one thing that we haven't quite figured out is what exactly is global consciousness? How does it work? How does it affect us? What's the difference between what we have now and how are we going to get to that in the future? So let's do none of that, but let's talk about trees. Trees. This one is apparently with extra caffeine. Ooh, and it's cola flavored. Now we're talking! That was louder than I thought it would be. Let's talk more about global consciousness because I'm aware that about a year ago I said the Earth is due a pandemic, and then now we've had a pandemic and I'm too lazy to find the video to prove that I said it first. So I want to talk about global consciousness so that when it happens in real life, people can think back fondly about me saying it first and go, yeah, I remember where I first heard that. Okay, what is global consciousness? It's not what you're thinking. So what you're thinking about is just how the world does things now when they group together. Like for instance, an election. And then they get the smart people to make a decision, and then one person makes the decision, and then things get corrupt because power corrupts, absolutely, or something. I don't remember, Spider-Man. But my point is, global consciousness is not what you're thinking about. Whew, I need a sip because this is getting very, very exciting. Oh, feel that caffeine. Okay, what is global consciousness then? Global consciousness is when your single consciousness, which is currently locked inside your head, all dark and alone, shame, poor consciousness, now gets connected with all the other consciousnesses in the world. And not just in a way where, like in a Skype or Zoom call where everyone's on the same call. It's more like you think together as one. Now I've got a good example about how things work in the two different ways, but I'm going to need to take another sip because again, things are getting way too exciting. There's two ways that global consciousness can work. There's the robot bee way. For instance, when you have one person in charge, like the queen bee, and then really, I'm trying to do something here. And then they give instructions to all the little robots, and then the robot drones just go off and do the instructions. That's one way. It's like a hive mind, and it works pretty well. But the one that I think we as humans are going to evolve to is the one that trees have. Trees? Yes, okay, trees. So trees are really good at the global consciousness way of doing things, but they're not very good at the single consciousness way of doing things. Trees, as a single entity, are pretty stupid. They have no control over where they've been planted, and then they stay planted there for the rest of their life. Stupid trees. As individuals, they're ridiculous. I need another sip. I need another one. But as a community, a forest of trees, an entity as a forest, that thing is pretty powerful, and also they can, tell the other trees things, and it's pretty complex how trees work as a global consciousness, and that is how humans are going to do it. We are going to be, the combination of all of us is going to be more than the individual parts added together or something. I think I screwed up that saying, but you know what I mean. See, you should have just trusted me. Told you trees were going to be important to this whole conversation. That was good. I think we covered a lot here. You've done well. You stuck around. And speaking of sticking around, hit like, hit subscribe, hit comment. What else do you do on YouTube? Share it? I don't know. Do YouTube stuff. Come on, guy. Get involved.